Kate Grace, welcome to the Running Effect podcast. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Take me through the first month, first week, whatever you want to take me through after the U.S. Olympic trials. You made kind of that post that you're probably done from competitive running. What was the aftermath like?
So, I am someone who loves a break. I don't know if it's like the middle distance or like more sprinter in me, but I do not mind like, I don't know, a week or two of just nothing, especially now that I have a family. It's maybe a little bit less lazy than normal, but just like being back in Boulder after being away, enjoying like walks and just kind of like a more chill life was great. That said, what I did not know, honestly, like until a few days after, is that I actually like hurt myself pretty badly when I fell in the semifinal and like kind of crashed on the side. So I would say the first few days were just like I just was enjoying like the letdown, and then I started to realize like, oh man, my knee actually hurts. Like I tried to go on a jog when we got back on Wednesday, and I like had to stop within 5 minutes, and then same like a few days later. So it was just like slow realization of like, oh crap, I'm injured. And I feel like injuries are generally suck, but like especially when I just vocalize like, oh, I'm stepping away from, or like I'm not going to be training anymore for track this year. Um, it's kind of like you just assume like you want to be a normal person for a second and not be injured. You know, like being injured in as a normal person just like really sucks because it's like, wait, I want to just like do easy, fun things. I want to go for jogs. So that was like a little bit of a mind fuck, I would say. But now it's been 5 weeks or 6 weeks almost, and I'm just starting back running. So that's been fun.
I know the general cycle of a professional runner, barring injury or sickness, it's like this 12-month perfectly planned out. You want to peak for the summer, then you take a few weeks off, and then you build up fall training. It's all base miles, all that stuff. And it's just so dialed in. You obviously have had such a long career in the sport as we can get into. And so I'm sure you're just so used to that schedule mentally. Has that been weird kind of getting to the point where most years you would be, starting those base miles again? And now you're like, oh, wow, I don't have to worry about the fall threshold sessions.
Kind of. Although, so when I like said that that was my last track race, I was like pretty specific about saying it that way because I had honestly like my immediate reaction after the trials was like, I want to take 2 weeks off and then train for a marathon. Like seriously. Um, which I understand that as like a middle distance athlete who's the last probably 4 years has not run more than 50 to 60 miles a week, it would be a little bit of a transition. But like, I'm definitely a planner. I'm someone who I think like the ideal athlete mind is someone who can make a good plan and like understand that you need the plans for the next year, for the next 4 years, but then is also like totally cool with throwing out the plans when necessary. Like, I think that's one of my core philosophies in terms of like what you need to be as for an athlete. But that said, I like love a good plan. And so my like new kind of fun thing to focus on was like, oh, actually roads and maybe a marathon would be really interesting and really fun. So when I finished the trials, my first thought was like, like let's train for a marathon, take a little break and train for a marathon. And then I was like, oh crap, like actually I can't run. My knee is hurt. So I had to kind of weirdly then go through the reality of like, oh, actually, like this is going to be a longer time off than I wanted. Yeah, which it's I think I've gotten better at it, but it's never easy having an injury like derail a little bit of what you want, you know?
What was kind of the mentality behind that decision, and what excites you most about the marathon? I personally, I'm sure you could come up with instances, but this is unique. I mean, if you said this in 2 years, I may be like, oh, that I could see that happening. A lot of people do that, but one of the best runners, not just in the US, but in the world in the eight. And then, as soon as it's over, you're thinking about doing a marathon. I feel like makes you unique. What was the mindset and process behind that?
Again, like I realized that it'd be a different level of competitiveness. Like I wouldn't go in assuming that I would be anywhere close. I would be close to my competitiveness in the marathon as I am at my middle distances. Um, I would say what's unique about it on the one hand is like I think just time of life. I with where I am with wanting to have more kids with different things. I'm just like there's not time. Like there's not time to be indecisive or to put off what you want to do. You know, like if I want to have another kid next year, then it's either at one point or like in the next 2 years. I'm like, okay, whatever I want to get out of running is going to have to happen now. You know, and I honestly think that that probably should be generally more of a mindset of like everybody, but it just easier to be reminded of it like the older you are and the more you have other family responsibilities. And also like I think it's funny because my career has always been I've always been a specialist in the middle distances, but I've trained with a lot of distance athletes. So most of my training between Bowerman and Team Boss has been, and then even now like running with the track club is like a local kind of more sub elite athletes, although Laura Thweet is on the team. That it's generally been like I've been around like a lot of athletes who do distances and marathons, and I've just been like it just looks like an interesting and kind of like fun different community that I feel like would be a lot of fun both to train with, and it also just like maybe fits more into a lifestyle. I don't know. I feel like I'm someone who's always exploring new things, and like that's part of the thing I like love about running is like takes you to different places around the world, and so I would include that even with like different training philosophies and distances.
Do you think you'll always be someone who's like constantly going after some sort of physical challenge, no matter how old you get? That's what it
I
sounds
kind
like.
of, yeah, I feel like kind of. I mean, again, uh, yeah, I think there's also something to be said for like if you've been going for speed for so long, it just like to change it up and be like, okay, how far could I run? Like what would bonking feel like? You know, even though it would suck, it's like a different kind of suck, you know? Like the kind of suck of a I was actually texting the kind of hard that it takes to like have a long hard workout is so different than like a really fast short workout, you know? And you kind of just like want to experience it. Also, while I'm able, like while I feel like, especially for women, you can really run like good hard workouts like through your 30s, and then I feel like it starts like then you're really like start tapering off, and it's just more. It's like you have to kind of find different goals. So like while I'm physically able, like why not see like what you can do, you know?
Are you going to be the kind of mom that, as if River gets into running one day and he's starting to focus on the 8 and he's getting down to like 2:15, you're going to be like, I'm going to lace him back up, do some 8 training with you. I'm going to show you who's boss.
I know. It's funny. I see these Instagram things about people who like it's usually dads who it's like
I've seen
the
those.
dad races their son, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I would definitely do this where I'd like race him every year. Uh, I don't think I'm going to be like an overbearing sport mom. I think I actually have thought about this recently because I have like pretty strong feelings about this. I think everyone's different, but my parents were like pretty removed from my athletics. There was someone almost always there, like at my sports, but I didn't feel like insane pressure from them. I didn't specialize like until I was like 16 or 17. Like there was and maybe that's just generational. Like maybe now it's just impossible to get that, you know? I know people are specializing earlier and maybe it's good in some ways, but I don't know. Like I joke with my husband, like if River gets into swimming, because my husband was a swimmer, I'm like, I don't know. I'm not going to go to the practices. Like you're driving him like this early morning stuff. And I joke, obviously, like if your kid is passionate, you're going to follow their passion. But I just think I see so much within the pro world, like you have to be self motivated, and so I just think it gives you. I think it's so helpful when parents let their kids find that motivation and don't like try to insert it for them, you know?
For you, we've talked about this marathoning, obviously dependent upon how the next few years shake up, and I know you want to do so many things in other aspects of your life, so it depends on how that interweaves with it. I know, but I find it very hard to believe that with some solid training, you wouldn't be able to easily run an Olympic trials qualifying time. Have you thought at all about LA 2028? Just in terms of like, you see the pictures and you know so many of the athletes who, they know they're not going to make the team, but the experience is truly once in a lifetime. It's so much fun. Has that crossed your mind at all in terms of lining up? I know they haven't announced the location, wherever it might be for the trials 2028.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I feel like it's just like an experience, especially if it's within reason to make the trials time. That said, I feel like the where the trials are is always like kind of like I wish it was a better place, especially in LA, especially LA 2028. You would kind of hope it was just in LA. So I'm from LA, so it would be like so fun to run there. Um, I mean, maybe they'll do that. It would make sense, like if the Olympic marathon is going to be there, why don't you just run the same course? If I was a USATF official, I would be like, hey, you guys run the same course, and then that'd be really fun. But uh, yes, like if I think it would, I would love to do that, make the trials standard and then run. That said, like my other like little pet thing right now is like the idea of maybe getting into coaching, and I think it'd be so fun. I mean, I don't know at what level, and there's obviously like pros and cons to different ones, but like it's funny now just trying to think about, oh man, like what if you were helping to coach a pro group that had athletes there? Like there'd be so many different ways to be involved with the Olympics. But definitely watching Paris, it's getting me so excited for when the Olympics are here.
What's an unorthodox sport that you think most people wouldn't guess you're a massive fan of, but you've been either watching or excited to watch, anticipating in the Olympics?
I'm honestly pretty bad. Like I'm actually like I'm a pretty bad sports fan. I honestly like that's almost like that's my embarrassing thing is being a pro athlete. Like I like individual stories. So example, gymnastics, like people where I can start following people and I get into their stories. I'm like, oh man, now I'm into it. But uh yeah, like there I am not unless I know somebody, I am like not necessarily following sports, which honestly is kind of embarrassing because I feel like as a pro athlete, you kind of have to because like that's how we like that's why we make money.
So a minute ago, we were talking about LA 2028, the possibility of lining up for the US Olympic marathon trials. You turned professional in 2011. We're in 2024 here. So 13-year, super successful career. You've been going at it for so many years. I think a lot of athletes in your shoes would get to that point 13 years in. And I know this is the case for so many of them. They'd be absolutely burnt out and just want to take years off from the sport. For you, were there any things during your career that you feel like helped to put you in a sustainable spot that when you stepped away from the sport, you could approach it from a perspective where, you can tackle another challenge just in a different way?
That's a good question. Um, I would say the one thing I always point to that for better or worse is I've taken quite a bit of time away from competing and from like intense training, um, which probably could be argued like maybe took away from like my top end like performance. But I've had multiple years where because of injury or now childbirth that I was like out of running and I not cross training, like not like definitely not feeling like an intense like athlete mindset for like 4 months of the year, like a third of the year. Uh, and going back to like 2013, like my second year pro, I took a bunch of time off that fall, 2015, 2020, this last 2 years. So I think there's a positive and a negative to that because I do think in a way like by not focusing earlier, um, I maybe gave up some like of my like inner like ability to like really perform. I kind of really perform and like peak performance, whatever, like during like my like main career. But that said, I do think that it like allowed me to have a very healthy relationship with the sport and really like keep my passion for it. Um, yeah, so it's like a give and take. Like I don't know. It's like one of those quick questions. Like, would you be a crazy person if you could get a gold medal? Maybe. Like if you knew you could get a gold medal, but like you also might not. And my thing is like you might not get a gold medal. And like I've had like the most incredible 13 years and like feel so full and have such great relationships from it. And I want running to be a part of my life forever. So that's all pretty cool. I may still like, I maybe if I went back, I'd be still be like, I would give up a few years of being crazy, but I don't know.
Talking about some of your years as a professional runner, as well as combining it with our talk surrounding the Olympics, which are going on right now. 8 years ago in Rio, I believe 2016 was your first Olympic Games. And I remember it being super special just for you and your team, the Bowerman Track Club, where you would know the exact number, but I think there was like 5 or 6 of you competing. It was remarkable. And I remember the iconic photo that is made it in Shalane's cookbook of you guys jumping outside your rental house in Park City. Take me through the build up to the Olympics and just the excitement around being you were 5 years into your career at that point, but obviously you knew there would be many more years ahead. What was that like experience and euphoria of those few months like?
So it's actually interesting. I actually was not Nike yet, and I actually didn't join the team until the next year. And this is like where I feel like my career has been an interesting. It's funny because like at the time I was already 27, but that was like really my first year. I had like a kind of a breakout year in 2013, but like 2020 or 2016 was like really my first year, like really on the scene. In 2013, I got fourth at the World Championship trials. Um, but anyway, the so I wasn't Nike yet, and I was actually training in Sacramento. And it's so yeah, it was like a huge making the team that year was and winning the trials, which in the 800 that year, honestly, it was like reminds me of the 800 this year in that there was a big fall and like three of the favorites went down. Or were impeded. And so there was a ton of speculation afterwards, like, are they going to rerun it? Whatever. But personally, like as someone who I won, and then basically that catapulted me into like my career. I made the final at the Olympics, and then I finished fifth in the Diamond League final, which like was huge. I was PRing everything, like, and I felt like, and then I got my Nike contract. Like everything happened because of that race. So I very much am like, have very mixed feelings, but I'm very grateful for like everything that happened. Even though it like really sucked, and there was like, it was really hard to see people not make the team. Obviously, like with the fall, it's just interesting that the eight. That's like it happens frequently, like weirdly frequently at our trials. Um, but yeah, it was funny because even though you say now it was the start of my career, like at the time I thought it was the end because like I don't know, like or I thought it was like could be the end. Like more and more people are going longer, especially women. But like I don't know, like you kind of think like oh you're at your peak age, or like I'd been told I was at my peak age, like this is my Olympics. Like what else is there kind of left to do? And so I actually moved up in distance the next year after getting like eighth or seventh at the Olympics, because I was like, I didn't think that there was much more for me to do. Which now I'm like, man, what was I thinking? Like, yeah, and so I think one of my biggest takeaways is that especially for women, like you need to think about your career as going definitely into your early 30s is like that your peak definitely goes through that phase, especially taking into account like whatever like your training age is. If you kind of didn't train very hard in college and you're just starting in pro when you're 22 or whatever, like you have to think of it as like an 8-year cycle. And I don't know. It's like it's so funny thinking back that like I thought of that like I didn't think there was much more, and then basically like my career started from there, and I had like 8 amazing years. I didn't make the team obviously in 2021 either, but I had like a great like whatever like European circuit. So yeah, I would say the biggest thing is like just going with your gut and like knowing if you feel like you understand your training, like if there's more that's going to come, if you want to do whatever certain event you want to do, like don't follow what your coaches are thinking. Like do what you believe you're best at.
We can get into some of these things specifically, but high school, you were a state champion. In college at Yale, I think you broke 4 school records and you were a 4-time All-American. And then we've kind of talked through some of your accomplishments as a professional, titles, records, the whole thing. Was there ever a moment in your career, or maybe it was before that, middle school, I'm not sure the stats on that one for you, but was there ever a moment where you shocked yourself, surprised yourself, you came back from a race and you're like, wow, I'm really doing it. I'm better than I thought I was, or I can do this now.
I didn't run in middle school. I didn't run until like high school. I played soccer, and honestly, I played soccer like a lot of high school. So like I didn't. I was joking the other day that like I've never surprised myself in a race. I would say like my first season of running or second season of running when I was like barely training and I ended up like uh, getting third at California State meet. That was basically like when we first realized like, oh, I have a lot of potential. Like that's yeah, I would say that running is maybe the only sport where you can do that, or like running or maybe just swimming. But running is like, it's just such a naturally talented thing that like it's really easy to tell when the athletes that like are barely training specifically are still doing relatively well. It's like, okay, like this could be something. And that's when it started opening up, like colleges would be interested. And same when I was a freshman at Yale, back then there was like, I think there was like 2 standards for the trials, and I made like the B standard, and I didn't even really know that was like a possibility. Again, it's funny. I was so like dumb to running that I didn't realize there was pro runners. I didn't realize like really that I could even qualify for the Olympics, and so like freshman year to like have the like to basically like have the accolade of having qualified for the Olympics, even though I didn't even go to the trials. Like that opened up a door to me, like, oh, this is a new world. Like the Olympics are a possibility, and that's probably when I started thinking, like that could be one day down the road. Although I would have no idea that it would still be doing this however many years later.
You mentioned a minute ago how you didn't start running until high school. I'm sure I heard that on a podcast sometime years ago,
Yeah.
but I didn't remember it. So shocked in the moment, just with how good you've become. And you said you played soccer, into your high school years. Bringing that kind of back to a former conversation we were having earlier in the conversation about your son River and sports progression and all of that. What's your kind of general take on people specializing so early? Just even in my conversations with people on the podcast, it seems quite frequently, surprisingly to me, the extent to which athletes didn't go all in with running until later. But I think also at the same time, as someone who wasn't in high school too long ago, I'm seeing this, this kind of resurgence of social media where fifth graders are curious about double threshold training. And so
Okay.
I'm just, I wouldn't say I'm an advocate for, but I wonder the extent to which it's actually beneficial to play a second sport in high school rather than start your kid or the kid or holding back your kid of like, hey, you got 10 years till you're in high school. What's your kind of, I know that wasn't really a question, but general take on that from your
Oh,
experience?
totally. It's interesting seeing how it's changed. Again, I don't even know if it's comparable. Like when I was in high school, we didn't have like I didn't have Instagram, right? Like it didn't exist yet. So it's literally like a different world, and I'm honestly like mostly scared about how to raise a kid in that world. Um, the so I don't know. It's almost like we opened Pandora's box. I don't know if we can go back. Like in a way, maybe it's good to have. I could see the argument that it's good to have more information about healthy training, whatever. Um, I have seen some stats. Like I know David Epstein, who's like the sports journalist, has written a lot about the like how it's really helpful to not special or to be generalists early on. And there's some stat where like most Olympic athletes didn't specialize until like 16 or 15, which was the case for me. Like I would say if you're gonna be an Olympian, you're gonna have a ton of talent and you don't need to specialize. But it's always hard because like what if someone just like wants to be good in high school and get a scholarship to college, right? Like there scholarship to college, that's like 200 grand or more. Like, I totally see the reasoning to be like, no, we're going to train, we're going to get this kid to college, like they're going to have a free education. Like, that to me is like, okay, I understand the logic there. Especially me, like now I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to save for his college. Like, let's just have him be an athlete. uh that said, if you're purely going on like athletics, oh my god, and just like mental health, like it just doesn't seem fun to me. I'm like, you have so much else to do. Like, what do you? I had so much fun on team sports. I had so much fun like doing other things, like not being insanely zero, like one one track minded. And I was still competitive. Like, you can still train hard. I think there's just like a tiny bit of like bringing it down a notch or two, especially when we see so much right now about rise in anxiety, rise in depression. Like, it's hard to balance that amount of like focus. I just think that the negatives outweigh the benefits.
You got it. I get what you're saying. And I can leave a link to that in the show notes. I don't know if you read it because he has articles along the same lines, but Range by David Epstein, fantastic book, dives into all the things you're talking about as you kind of referenced there, was super eye-opening to me. And then he also talks about the other example, which is really interesting. And this isn't, I'm not going to use Tiger to justify everyone in this box, but the other examples like Tiger, who had a golf club in his hand by like, 1.5, and ultimately became his life, consumed him, and ruined other aspects of his life. So also on the other hand, it's like, I don't think it's sustainable to make your whole life your sport, your entire life. In
Totally.
regards to that, even if someone wants to go all in running, can you speak to the benefit of having other things going on in your life, whether it's other relationships, friends who have no relation to running, investing in family, maybe I don't know. There are a whole plethora of things I'm sure you've seen your teammates get into over the years or yourself personally. Can you speak to kind of the uh, positives of having a balanced lifestyle? Of course, there's going to be imbalance to be great, but there's still a semblance of balance that you should have to be mentally healthy, probably.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think if we're going to talk about like the best way to be good at running is consistency, long-term consistency. And the best way to have long-term consistency is to like never diverge too much from baseline, right? Like your wins, like your either wins or losses, like good days, bad days, like you're trying to just be even. You're trying to like as much as possible just like have this like really long even slope. And I think again the best way to do that is to have a strong foundation, whether it's like core values, family, um, I mean, community, religion, like everything that would give you this like very strong, solid base. First of all, because you need to be able to, if you really do want to like be good, you need to be able to like take the very long outlook. That you have to like find the fun in kind of the monotony of like not kind of sexy workouts, not like these intense hard efforts, just like enjoy the like training. And that means like basically enjoying your life, like yeah, which means like your friends, your training partners, whatever. And the reason to have running not be the main thing is because like there's going to be ups and downs. I guess I'm saying ideally you want this like whatever even trajectory, but like there's going to be ups and downs. Injuries are common. And if you're going to weather them, it's going to be because you have like a strong identity outside of sport. Um, and yeah, for me, it was always like in college, my main friend group or one of my main friend groups and my roommates weren't runners. They didn't really understand. They're super supportive, and they're like texting me and they love when I do, and I still am running, but they don't know anything about it. They don't follow the sport. And yeah, and again, I've always had a very close relationship with my family, my sister, now my son. Um, it just gives you that balance. I don't think I almost never lost it. I got really into, I would say the closest I came to like losing my footing or like my identity outside of being a runner was after 2021, so like the Olympic year, but that I basically had this like incredible summer season where I ended up like second in the Diamond League and like ranked like third or fourth in the world. And I just was on such a high from that. And like, I only wanted to run and to compete. And then I basically like I basically like got COVID and like didn't recover right away. And I kind of hate that like that's like very much part of my story, but like that's what happened. I don't know. I can't like control it. And the got so depressed, like more than I ever have. And I, again, was like full adult. Like I was like 33 at the time. Like I thought I was way past the issues of like identity with running or whatever. But I had like kind of regressed and I was so, so sad. Like for 6 weeks, like literally would like randomly start crying, like in my kitchen. Like I have videos of myself, like just, I was like melting down. And it was a wake up call. Like no matter how good you think you are, no matter like how together you have it, like I had to rethink like, oh man, like I've kind of lost my identity outside of being a runner. When I, and I need to find that again because like, yeah, because like life, if anything bad happens, like I was not prepared. I was not prepared for the like down steps or whatever. And then I ended up having a baby. I was like, okay, I should have a baby. Like that'll even me out.
Throughout your years of just absolutely high level running, what is a misconception you think most people have about what it takes to be great and the world of professional running?
I mean, it's so cliche to be like, I feel like everyone, it's so cliche to be like, you need to do your easy days easy, or like you need to like recover a little bit because that's like what everyone says. So I'm trying to think of something else.
What I always say is, whenever people say cliche, I say, well, normally it needs to be reiterated then. If it gets said all the time, maybe there's some truth to it.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. It's just like it's been. I think it's maybe more now, more realized, but it's just like it's been a really fun life. Like it's been. I think it's hard. It's like the whole thing. It's quote. It's a privilege to choose your suffering, and I think it's obviously it's like hard work, and you're working hard at the track. But it's such a privilege to have that be the thing. I think it's in some ways easier, or people look at it and they're like, "Oh, what do you do all day?" Like in some ways, it is like I spent however many years, 10 years, like not taking a vacation really, like not really having weekends. Like you can't really like go out with friends for like 10 hours on a lake. I mean, occasionally, yes, but like generally it's probably a much more like monkish lifestyle. But that said, like I love every minute of it. Like I love going to practice. I love every kind of workout, like any kind of effort, hard, easy, medium, whatever. And I think, um, and so maybe people realize that, but it's like everything is enjoyable. Yeah, I don't know.
I think in my conversations with people who have made it as far as you have or have been successful as you have, they all have a common theme, which is they truly love to run.
Yeah.
And I do think it's pretty darn hard to get to where you're at without enjoying and loving the sport. Could you reiterate that point, I think, to a younger listener listening today who maybe, I hear this all the time. People always advise, like their last piece of advice is have fun with the sport. And I think to a younger listener, it's like, what do you mean? Like, why, can you reiterate why it's so important and how you will have no longevity if you don't enjoy it? It's unbearable. You'll burn out.
Oh yeah. You'll burn out if you don't enjoy the sport. Like also just what are you doing with your life? Like I think it's funny. I'm not that old, but like you do. I feel like just realizing I think more and more, especially now, like with a kid, when like there just isn't as much time in the day. It's like again, it's a privilege to choose your suffering. It's a privilege to choose what you do with your time. And even if you're 15, let's say ideally you have 7 years of like real kind of like flexibility with time until let's say you start working, right? Like that 7 years actually isn't that much. Like you're going to look back, it'll feel like a flash, and you're going to want to look back and be like, and have things that you hold on to of like, oh man, that was the best. Like that was like the time of my life. And so if it's not like, if you do not like, I would not every day, but if you do not like 6 or 5 or 6 days a week, be like, man, like this is a great use of an hour. then you should be doing something else with that hour. Because the hours seem, again, it's like the days seem long, but like you're gonna look back and it's gonna be a flash. And like 2016 was like a flash in my mind, was like so recent. Yeah, and then it's gone, and then you don't have it again. So it's like, I don't know. This is like being somewhat poetic, but it's like,
Hey, it's poetic.
like, what's the purpose of life if not to enjoy the time or what you're doing with your time? You know?
Spot on. Spot on. A little earlier ago, you mentioned the desire or interest or curiosity around becoming a coach one day. Uh, Obviously, we'll see where that goes. I'm super excited to see where that goes. But a question I have for you regarding it that came off the top of my head: you've had great coaches throughout your years of running. What are some lessons off the top of your head that you've learned from those coaches that you now want to implement into your own coaching, whatever that might be down the road?
I feel like there's different types of coaches. So there's like the sciencey coaches, and then there's like the real emotional coaches, you know? And there's some coaches that like my first coach out of college, Frank Gagliano, was like, I don't, there's zero science to what he's doing. It's all heart. But like, you wanted to do anything for that man. I would still do anything for that man, you know? And I think there's such value in a coach that like gets you to believe in yourself. Even honestly, my high school coach, like I still text my high school coach, and when he tells me he's proud of me, like it still gets me. And I just think, so I think like the value of a good coach to give you that belief in yourself and to really like make you want to perform, like it's priceless. And then I think there's the coaches that push you. Like I feel like Jerry pushes people just so hard, but it is also kind of, in a way, even though I think probably like it wasn't necessarily the best training for me. The whole like I needed a slightly different training. It is kind of interesting. It's just kind of the curiosity question, like what can I do today, you know? And I think there's a value in being like, oh man, I can push myself harder than I thought I could. Uh, yeah, I don't know. That's like not really. I don't know if that's a real answer, but
That's an answer.
uh,
That's an answer.
yeah.
Obviously, as you're kind of exiting the ultra serious side of track and field and competing in that, as you think to the legacy you want to leave behind, have you come up with an answer, or have you thought about that? What's the legacy you want to leave behind in track and field?
I don't know. It's interesting thinking about. Um, it's funny. I'm thinking about, that Nike commercial that's out right now. Like have you seen the Olympic one where it's
Hmm.
it's kind of intense. Like I don't know if it's about like, yeah, whatever, it kind of like the
Something
negatives
about
of
winning.
winning. Yeah,
Yeah,
like the
yeah, yeah.
dark side of winning. Um, I like it more and more the more I see it, because it gets to that point that we're talking about. Like there, it is that either or. Like, would you want to be Tiger, and like have your life kind of in shambles, but be like the ultimate champion? Um, or would you want to be like someone that no one like really knows their name, but you like have a wonderful life and you love your family? And like, I I guess the other one really is like what I feel most fulfilled with. But you always be like, oh, but it's pretty cool to be Tiger. Like only one person gets to be Tiger, you know? Which is why we love to watch the Olympics. Like I mean, honestly, like the Ingebrigtsens are kind of like that. Like they had this really contentious relationship with their coach and or their dad, because he was so hard on them. But like they're also the best in the world, and like Jakob is probably the best in the world because of that, you know. So that's the question you get back to. Like you can have a crazy parent and you have now a multiple Olympian. I don't know. I think it's both sides that make the world, and it's why it's so fun to watch the Olympics. Um, this is me going on a rambling thing of like what's better. I guess, and it's like if I would go back, if I knew everything I knew now, if I could really focus at like 22, uh, maybe that would be fun. But also maybe I wouldn't have met my husband. I don't know. So
There's
I
there's
think
this great there's
go
this
ahead.
great quote that's I heard it in a podcast, and he said champions are broken, or champions tend to be broken people. I might butcher the quote a little bit. Champions tend to be broken people. Almost every single like champion got really, 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 really good at one thing by sacrificing almost everything else in the process. And you name some of the names, but Tiger Woods, if we were to list his issues, it'd be a podcast. Michael Jordan, gambling addiction. Tom Brady, divorce. You just go down the list of people who are considered GOATs. I mean, even Michael Phelps, extreme depression. And yeah, it's a personal calculation. I think at the end of the day, it's like Phelps has 32 gold medals. You know, his legacy is remarkable, but also at the same time, did he get to such a low point in his career that was worth it? I can't make that judgment for him. You can't, only he can.
Yeah.
So it's, I think, do you really want to be great? If you do, it's gonna, and it's even difficult for something like a podcast where it's like, yeah, I mean, I know there are things I could do that would just, 100 exit, but I would sacrifice relationships with people in my life who I care about. And so it's ultimately, I think, balance is the word. It's like imbalance in the balance. I love these conversations. They really make you think, because everyone struggles with that, right?
I would say, yeah, it's also like yeah, I mean, there's all different levels of that, and like even on like a smaller scale, right? So everyone, I would say it's probably just interesting because it's on like a real spectrum, or it's like the real end of the spectrum. But like everyone in every life, like you have to make those choices between work, between family, and we all have to like make choices and then live with them. And so in a way, maybe that's why athletics is fun, is you get to see like, okay, what are the different outcomes of these choices? Yeah, even with coaching, like could you coach athletes to be the absolute best with a plan, and have it be enough balance that they would still, like, God forbid they get injured or whatever happens, like that they would still come out like whole people, like not broken people. And I think you can, if you go and if you, yeah, I think it's possible. And I think we're seeing more and more of it, but it is like definitely a fine line. In terms of legacy, I mean, I don't know if this is a legacy, but just like what I love racing, and I love being like fierce, seeing what I can get out of myself, which is even why, like, if I ever did roads, I wouldn't even care as much about like the times. It's just like that ultimate point of like in a race, seeing if you can go past your expectations of yourself, like really push yourself to your edge. And I feel like I've done that throughout my career, whether it be like against American competitors, against international competitors, like kind of surprising yourself and surprising them, and just like really being fierce out there. I just had so much fun with that. And so I hope that anyone that I've competed against, like, kind of feels that energy and like could, yeah. And um, that lives on either through my competitors or through people who have watched races, and in maybe like future races I do. Just like that, they're, even if maybe you're not the, I didn't have the like 8 perfect years build, but I like definitely gave it my all at the point, and it was like an inspirational show in the moment.
Kate, final serious question for you as we wrap up today's conversation. As you think of your running career as a whole, from high school all the way up to present day, you think back to all the memories, all the moments. What is a memory that makes you smile?
I have so many of them. I mean, yeah, I have a ton of good memories, which I feel very lucky about. I think there's there's nothing that beats being on a high school cross country team, or like a cross country team or a college track relay team. I think because that it gives you that feeling of winning as a team. And so I think, yeah, I have some memories of winning state with my cross country team, and then in college, like winning some Heps championships with some relay teams. That was just like, it's just so fun to be able to pull through and be that person, and I think that's in a way, like, even if your listeners are younger, like that's why the sport is fun, because the pros, like, we don't get that as much. So pros who have been going for however long, you still have in your heart like this like love for high school and college, because that's when you get that team aspect more than anything. Yeah.
Kate, love my conversation with you. Final question to wrap it up. The question I ask every single guest on every single episode. If you had Gordon Ramsay coming over to your house for dinner, what would you choose to make for him? You probably wouldn't be allowed in the same room as River, but.
Oh gosh. I should have done research to know this was your question. What would I choose? I'd have Patrick make something.
Okay, what's the best meal he makes that you'd have him make?
Yeah. I feel like I probably do fish the best. So I would do like some kind of salmon thing. And He like kills a brunch. Honestly, like if money was no object, he would open like a breakfast brunch place. So like homemade biscuits, homemade biscuits with some like eggs and some kind of hash thing. Like he actually like I would actually pay money for that.
Well, on that note, I'm now hungry and need to go make some food. So, Kate, really appreciate the conversation. Really appreciate all the wisdom you shared. And yeah, it's been such a joy and privilege following your career over the years. I probably started following the sport somewhere in between the middle of it. And so, from
Yeah.
that point, all the way up to present day and all the remarkable things you've accomplished, it's an honor to have this conversation and love the conversations we had. So, keep crushing it and excited to see all that you do in the years to come.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.